1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes I lay under the moon, I thank God I'm breathing, and I pray, don't take me soon, 'cause I'm here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all of my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more war, and our children will play. One day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day. It's not about win or lose. We all lose when they feed on the souls of the innocent. Blood-drenched pavement, keep on moving though the waters stay raging. In this maze, you can lose your way, your way. It might drive you crazy, but don't let it faze you, no way, no way. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all of my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more war, and our children will play one day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day. One day this all will change, treat people the same. Stop with the violence, down with the hate. One day we'll all be free and proud to be under the same sun, singing songs of freedom. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh. All of my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more war, and our children will play one day, 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 oh.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to worship with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Silver Spring. My name is Preston Mears, and I am this morning's worship associate. My pronouns are he, his, and him. Our minister, the Reverend Kristin Schmidt, is back from vacation.
It's so good to be with you all again.
Good. And she'll be preaching today about the late, great Reverend A. Powell Davies, this is what he called the temptation to be good. In an era when so much is focused on all that's wrong, bad, and challenging, today we center down into that which beckons us towards goodness. As some of you may know, our neighboring Unitarian church in Camp Springs, Maryland, is named after A. Powell Davies. I'd also like to welcome any guests or visitors in the congregation today. Ryan Smith, he's in the back there, is our welcoming captain today, and he is available to answer questions about our congregation, both for those here in the sanctuary and those attending the service on Zoom. And please also remember to wear your mask at all times while inside church buildings as part of our welcome to one another. Now it's time to greet our neighbors. I invite those joining us by Zoom to take a moment and turn your camera on. And for people here in the sanctuary to turn and face the camera to your right, my left, and wave in greeting across the platform divide. There you are. Yes. In a moment, we will join in singing our opening hymn, number 1 in the Gray Hymnal. But first, I invite everyone on Zoom to greet one another in the chat, and for people here in person to say hello to your neighbors in the sanctuary. When the music starts, that will be your cue to come back to your seat and sing our opening hymn, number 1 from the Gray Book. Please join me in the words on the screen as we light our chalice and reaffirm our congregational commitment. May this light warm our hearts with love and caring and guide us in the ways of truth. As we gather here for worship, we pledge ourselves to the endless search for truth, to the right of each to believe as mind, heart, and conscience dictate, to accept the responsibilities this freedom commands, and to implement our belief in the essential worth and dignity of every human being. May it be so.
Won't you be seated? Come into this place of peace and let its silence heal your spirit. Come into this place of memory and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power and let its vision change your heart. Come, let us worship together. So this morning, our time for all ages is a story that I think most of you have heard before. I'm going to tell you the story of the Good Samaritan, a story that Jesus told to his followers to help explain what he thought the commonwealth of God would be like. Only, I'm going to tell you this story as if it were set in our time and place instead of 2,000 years ago in the Roman Empire. So one day, Jesus was outside the Wheaton metro station, talking with some people who had gathered around him and his friends. One man came to Jesus and asked him this, "Who is my neighbor?" And Jesus told this story to help the man better understand. Once upon a time, a man from Maryland was in Philadelphia, walking down the street when suddenly a group of thieves surrounded him, beat him up, and took everything he had. They left him lying, bleeding on the sidewalk. As he lay there in pain, he heard footsteps coming near him. He waited for what seemed like forever, but whoever it was had just walked past him. It happened to be a Unitarian Universalist. She was on her way to a social justice team meeting. When she saw the man lying on the sidewalk, she assumed he was homeless or drunk and wanted to help him, but ultimately decided just to keep walking because she was in a hurry. She was on her way to the social justice team meeting, after all, where they were trying to figure out how to address the problems this man was probably facing. And she didn't think she was really qualified to give this guy the help he needed anyway. After a little while, the man heard footsteps again, and all he could manage to do was moan. The footsteps belonged to a woman leaving the market, where some kids had made fun of her accent and her headscarf, and she really just wanted to get home. But as she passed by, she noticed the man lying beaten and bloody on the side of the road, and she felt sorry for him, and she wanted to help. She put down her bag and knelt down beside him to get a closer look. And when she noticed how badly he was hurt, she pulled her extra headscarf from her purse, folded it up, and placed it beneath his head as a makeshift pillow. "You're going to be all right. I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. My name is Alia Samaritan." Then she took out her cell phone and called 911 and waited with him for the ambulance and followed it to the hospital in her car. They wouldn't let her in to see him since she wasn't family, but she'd heard them say his name after they found his driver's license in his wallet, and so she bought a Get Well card from the gift shop, wrote her name and phone number on it, and told the man to contact her if he needed anything after he was discharged. Now, after finishing this story, Jesus asked the man, "Which of these two women was a neighbor to the stranger on the street?" And the man answered, "The one who stopped and helped him." And Jesus said, "That's right. Now you go and do the same." Here ends our time for all ages this morning. Spirit of life, oneness in all and in whom all are one, we have come together this morning with gratitude for the gifts life has brought us. We give thanks for all of the joys today, both those shared aloud and those brimming silently in our hearts. And alongside those joys, many of us also feel afraid or sad, worried or confused. This morning, we lift up all who are unwell in mind, body, or spirit, all who live with the pain of grief, loss, separation. We pray for those who live life afraid for whatever reason, those who feel isolated and alone, and all those now in harm's way. May all who have shared sorrows aloud and those whose sorrows are too deep for words feel held in the love of this congregation and the love that never lets any of us go. Whether rejoicing or grieving, giving or receiving, leading or following, we never do any of it perfectly. None of us is our best self all of the time. We all fall short of our ideals. Thankfully, ours is not a faith or a community that expects us to be perfect, just to be faithful to our values and our covenant, forgiving ourselves and others when we miss the mark, and beginning again in love over and over. So among our other prayers this morning, we pray for the strength to forgive both others and ourselves. Whatever we are, seeker or finder, believer or doubter, leader or follower, we are all ministers in our own ways, all partners with one another in answering life's great call to love the hells out of this world. May our time together here and now bless every one of us as we live out this call. May it be so. Amen. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Our reading this morning is an excerpt from a book entitled The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. Some years ago, two Princeton University psychologists, John Darley and Daniel Batson, decided to conduct a study inspired by the biblical story of the Good Samaritan. And as you may recall now, that story from the New Testament Gospel of Luke tells of a traveler who's been beaten and robbed and left for dead by the side of the road from Jerusalem to Jericho. Both a priest and a Levite, both worthy, pious men, came upon the man but didn't stop, passing by on the other side. The only man to help was a Samaritan, the member of a despised minority who Batson decided to replicate that study at the Princeton Theological Seminary. This was an experiment very much in the tradition of the FAE, and it's an important demonstration of how the power of context has implication for the way we think about social epidemics of all kinds, not just violent crime. Darley and Batson met with a group of seminarians individually and asked each one to prepare a short, extemporaneous talk on a biblical theme, then walk over to a nearby building to present it. Along the way to the presentation, each student ran into a man slumped in an alley, head down, eyes closed, coughing and groaning. The question was, who would stop and help? Darley and Batson introduced 3 variables into the experiment to make its results more meaningful. First, before the experiment even started, they gave the students a questionnaire about why they had chosen to study theology. Did they see religion as a means for personal and spiritual fulfillment? Or were they looking for a practical tool for finding meaning in everyday life? Then they varied the subject of the theme the students were asked to talk about. Some were asked to speak on the relevance of the professional clergy to the religious vocation. Others were given the parable of the Good Samaritan. Finally, the instruction given by the experimenters to each student varied as well. In some of the cases, as he sent the students on their way, the experimenter would look at his watch and say, "Oh, you're late. They were expecting you a few minutes ago. We better get moving." In other cases, he would say, "It will be a few minutes before they're ready for you, but you might as well head over now." If you ask people to predict which seminarians played the Good Samaritan, and subsequent studies have done just this, their answers are highly consistent. They almost all say that the students who entered the ministry to help people and those reminded of the importance of compassion by having just read the parable of the Good Samaritan will be most likely to stop. Most of us, I think, would agree with those conclusions. In fact, neither of those factors made any difference. It is hard to think of a context in which norms concerning helping those in distress are more salient than for a person thinking about the Good Samaritan. And yet it did not significantly increase helping behavior. Darley and Batson concluded. Indeed, on several occasions, a seminary student going to give his talk on the parable of the Good Samaritan literally stepped over the victim as he hurried on his way. The only thing that really mattered was whether the student was in a rush. Of the group that was, 10% stopped to help. Of the group who knew they had a few minutes to spare, 63% stopped. What this study is suggesting, in other words, is that the convictions of your heart and the actual contents of your thoughts are less important in the end in guiding your actions than the immediate context of your behavior. The words, "Oh, you're late," had the effect of making someone who was ordinarily compassionate into someone who was indifferent to suffering, of turning someone in that particular moment into a different person. Here ends the reading.
Several years ago, in our old apartment, our TV rested on a stand that was pretty low to the ground, a TV within easy reach, therefore, of little hands. One morning, when my son John was about a year old, he began crawling towards the television, so I called out to him, "John, no touching the TV." And here's where something interesting happened. As he giggled, I could see the gears begin to work in his young mind. I could see that at first he wanted to crawl to me to do what I had asked him to do, or rather not do what I had asked him to not do. But then for whatever reason, he changed his mind, shot me a mischievous smile, and began crawling towards the television as if his little life depended on it. This is one example of a phenomenon that the great mid-20th century Unitarian minister A. Powell Davies was fond of preaching about. Minister of All Souls Church in Washington, D.C. from 1944 to 1957, Dr. Davies' ministry was defined first by the Second World War and then by his leadership in the civil rights movement. Even as Nazi occupation threatened the globe and later as racist violence intensified here in the United States, somehow Dr. Davies remained convinced of the lure of goodness. Or as one of his acquaintances put it, at every level, people are almost good. They are tempted to be good, but they resist the temptation. It's easy to dismiss this idea as naive, I think. But Davies was no stranger to the realities of human brutality and suffering. He acknowledged the Unitarian idea that humans are born neither good nor bad, but that good and evil are both potential. We usually only hear about people falling into the temptation of evil, but not often about how people are lured by the temptation of goodness. And while I'd hardly characterize my son's playful defiance of my wishes as evil, it's interesting how he clearly felt tempted to do as I had asked him first, but then resisted it. Like Dr. Davies said, the temptation to be good is frequently a powerful one, so powerful indeed that if we choose evil, we have to pretend the opposite. We must excuse ourselves, rationalize, as the psychologists have taught us to call it, and make wrong seem right, or at least partly right. This is what happens all over the world, isn't it? Millionaires and billionaires rationalize not raising the minimum wages of their employees by blaming the poor for their poverty. The Michigan government rationalized allowing the entire population of Flint to be poisoned by lead in the water because it was cheaper than the clean water they'd used for years before. A year and a half ago, the former president rationalized calling his followers to storm the Capitol, either because he didn't believe he'd lost the election or just didn't think election results should matter as much as his hunger for power. These are extreme examples, but most of us can probably remember times we've felt lured to do something good and then rationalized not doing it. Our Time for All Ages story today speaks to a more common rationalization, I think. It's disappointing in the hypothetical when the UU on her way to a social justice team meeting walks right past an injured person and does nothing to help. And yet I've seen people do this in real life. I've done it. In every city I've ever worked in or visited, people walk right past others who are clearly in distress, lying on sidewalks, sometimes even asking for money and food, and we do nothing. Sometimes we don't even respond when they try to talk to us. As we heard in our reading, there are factors in our environment that shape how we perceive everything, that influence how we will respond to all sorts of situations. The big lesson for me here is that we have a lot less clear-cut choice in our lives than I used to think we do. It's funny, in a way. As Unitarian Universalists, we are often very focused on actions rather than beliefs, but it seems that what we believe about ourselves, about other people, and maybe even most importantly, about our immediate situation, determines an awful lot of what we wind up doing. If we see someone lying on the sidewalk, we might choose not to offer help because we think we can't. Like the seminarians in our reading, maybe we're in a hurry. Maybe it feels too complicated to get involved. Maybe we have our kids with us, and drawing the attention of someone who might turn into a loose cannon feels risky. Now, no situation is clear-cut. Sometimes our actions are less our choice than choices made for us by psychology. Sometimes our reason for acting or not acting is really important. But sometimes it's rationalization, isn't it? Things we tell ourselves to make resisting the temptation to be good feel easier. But what about not resisting the temptation to be good? What's it like to give in to this temptation? I can think of 100 examples of people in my life and right here in this congregation of accepting invitations to be and do good. So many times I have seen it here. It's one of the reasons I love being your minister. And if I've learned anything in 12 years of ministry, it's that the most good we can do is directly related to 3 things: means, opportunity, and the depth of relationship we are willing to have. In the Good Samaritan story, the Samaritan has all 3 of these things: the means to help, the opportunity to help, and the willingness to connect with the injured man in a relationship that crosses the boundaries of culture, faith, and politics. The other day, I was listening to a podcast by Tara Brach that recalled another story of goodness and healing that happened across boundaries. She told the story of Derek Black. He had been raised by white nationalists, his father a grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, his godfather was David Duke. He'd been homeschooled, never exposed to people or ideas that challenged his family's worldview. Eventually, he went to college, and it wasn't long until people there found out who he really was. And at this point, understandably, no one on campus wanted anything to do with him. It was during this time of pretty profound social isolation that Matthew Stevenson, an Orthodox Jew, invited Derek to Shabbat dinner. He'd been watching how people were treating Derek, telling him he was a terrible person and so on, and he worried that it was just going to make Derek even more convinced that his ideology was right. Matthew knew that Derek had grown up in a white nationalist family and probably didn't know anyone from the backgrounds his belief system rejected. It was for this reason that Matthew and a friend decided it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. In an On Being interview with Krista Tippett, Matthew lifts up that the time between Derek's first Shabbat dinner and when his beliefs began to change was not short. It did not happen quickly. It took 2 years. And during those 2 years, Matthew lost friends and received a lot of criticism for associating with Derek. When asked why he reached out to Derek, Matthew said this: "I felt like I had a unique opportunity because of my relatively visible identity to be able to extend a hand in a way. A Catholic student might not have been able to do in the same way because it might look, in some sense, that he was supporting the ideology that was being proposed." Even though most of the college community thought it was a terrible idea, even though they had every good reason not to, the group who welcomed him to Shabbat dinner for years took the risk of relationship with Derek. They had a unique opportunity to help a person who at first didn't even realize he needed help. They had the means to risk relationship. And perhaps most surprisingly, they had the willingness to risk a relationship with someone everyone else completely hated. Despite all of the perfectly logical reasons they shouldn't have, they gave in to the temptation to be good, to do good. And years later, in 2013, Derek wrote an article published by the Southern Poverty Law Center renouncing white nationalism. Some of you may remember that. Now, I want to be clear about a few things here. It is not the responsibility of oppressed people to educate or heal their oppressors. White people cannot go through life expecting people of color to educate us about racism. Christians cannot assume Jewish people will educate them about anti-Semitism. It's not my job as a woman to educate men about the patriarchy. No cis person can assume a trans or non-binary person will take on the responsibility for educating them about queer liberation. None of us is entitled to the emotional labor of another person. This is not a sermon about entitlement. This is a sermon about the temptation to be good, the power of choosing to be and do good when we have the means and we see an opportunity, the power of choosing to do good even if it's hard, the power of risking relationship across all sorts of barriers to offer help and healing. I'm also not suggesting that we all go out and seek out hard situations to thrust ourselves into. I'm not advocating we all go out and try to be saviors and heroes. But one day, we may find ourselves in a unique position with an opportunity to risk relationship with someone who really needs it, someone different from us in some pretty big ways. And this relationship might require us to reach across any number of differences and barriers. But the impact of choosing that connection anyway just might sow as much good as the Good Samaritan did. Not every connection across barriers will yield dramatic, newsworthy results. Healing, changes of heart, none of it is guaranteed. No one can really save another person. That's up to the mystery, the Spirit, the love that holds each and every one of us and never lets us go. But what I do know is that we can't and won't heal the brokenness in the human family and in our world today by huddling in echo chambers and refusing to risk relationship with people who have beliefs that disgust us. These kinds of relationships are not easy. As Tara Brock says, they require that we develop strong backs and soft fronts. Strong backs to help us stand firm in our faith and convictions, help us set and stick to healthy boundaries, and soft fronts that enable us to risk hurt, discomfort, and awkwardness for the sake of relationship, the only place where true deep healing is possible. I'd like to end today with words by Dr. Davies, words that he used to end his sermon about the lore of goodness and where in our world and our spirits we can find hope. And I'm choosing to end with his words because he says it better than I ever could. Goodness cannot be forgotten, and that is our hope. We are tempted not only to evil, but to goodness. Goodness powerfully attracts us. Virtue, even when we turn our backs upon it, shines so brightly behind that we can see the shape of our lives cast down in our shadows. The truth cannot be hidden from us. We know. The excuses are fluent upon our lips. Yes, but we know. We speak defiance, we shout denials, we surrender at last to despair. But still, we know. And what is it that we know? We know that we fear goodness, but that we fear because we love. The good, the true, the just, the gentle, these have claimed us. We belong to them. No matter what the evil deeds we do, we never love them. It is goodness that we love. We love it with a love that will not let us go. May it be so. Amen.
Thank you for your message. It's time for our offertory. It has often been said that the gifts we give to this congregation are like the oil in our chalice, the flame of faith and fellowship would die out without the fuel to keep it burning. It's also true that without the beauty of nature, the support of friends, the love of family, without the wisdom of the ages or the literal and figurative trees we didn't plant but under whose shade we sit, without these and all the other gifts we receive, yet do nothing to earn, what would we be? The gifts we give each week sustain the shared ministry of this congregation. But they are also a gesture of thanks for all of the gifts we receive in all areas of our lives that sustain us. For the secret of a truly rich life is found when we both give and receive, both with a thankful heart. As you can see on the screen, there are many ways to give your gift to our church. If you are here in person, you can also place your offering in one of the offering plates as it's passed around during the music that will begin in just a moment. May our hearts grow as we practice generosity together and as we help keep the dream of a better world alive. The offering will now be given and received with gratitude.
Good person, how do you do it? Do you just wake up with a smile on your face? Good person, what does it look like seeing the world as a big happy place? I'm trying to turn the page. Do you think I have what it takes? 'Cause I've cheated and lied and made people cry, but I pray for the ones that I love every night. I've shattered some hearts and my thoughts get dark, but I'd stop for a stranger who's falling apart. I'm still learning. Good person. Do you ever lose it when somebody steals that one last parking spot? Good person. Do you ever say no? Does the high road get lonely? Do you ever pull off? 'Cause I've cheated and lied and made people cry, but I pray for the ones that I love every night. And I've shattered some hearts and my thoughts get dark, but I'd stop for a stranger who's fallen apart. I'm still learning. Good person. Tell me how to be a good person. Good person. Have you cheated and lied or made people cry? The right hand of God, tell me, what is it like to throw out a stone, but all mirrors and smoke? They come to my show, but you won't let me go behind the curtain. Good person. Tell me how to be a good person. Good person. How to be a good person.
Our church is not only the organization that puts together these services, we're a vibrant community of volunteers and staff, a member of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and a part of the global UU denomination. Today, I have 3 announcements. It's over a month away, but Splash Sunday I said Splash Sunday, is scheduled for August 28th at 10:30. We will gather for the all-ages water ceremony service, where we will welcome our new Assistant Minister for Spiritual Growth, the Reverend Caitlin Cotter Coylberg. After the service, kids will be invited to enjoy all manner of water fun and activities on the lawn, and adults are invited back into the sanctuary for volunteer training. We'll share more details soon, but I hope everyone will mark their calendars now for Sunday, August 28th, to be at church. We also wish to remind everyone that the Sunday morning schedule, this is announcement number 2, will shift on the first Sunday of religious education classes, September 11th. Beginning that day, religious education classes for elementary, middle, high schoolers and adults will begin at 9:30. Worship will begin as usual at 10:30. Keep a lookout in the all-church emails and the September issue of the Uniter newsletter for more information about classes, how to register kids, and how to become an RE teacher. And my third announcement, last announcement, our worship committee is having a retreat after church Sunday, August 14th. And we will be reflecting on our experience this past year and looking ahead to the challenges of the coming year. Please feel free to share with me or with any members of our worship committee suggestions that you may have. And now, our closing hymn in the Teal Book, number 1017, Building a New Way.
Building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. Peace and freedom, every need. We can feed on every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without peace, the world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
Please join me in the words of Chalice Extinguishing. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again.
Goodness is a means, not an end. Look within. Who can stop the hunger for more than we deserve? Who can prevent a jealous thought from urging us to protect our hearts? Who can ward off all the uncertainties that disturb the mind before we decide to act? Were perfection required to be good, all human existence would be a living hell. Believe otherwise. Embodying love is the endless means to be good. In each moment, love stands at our side, ready to be chosen. Choose wisely. Our worship now has ended and our service begins.
Change the world with my own two hands, make a better place with my own two hands, make a kinder place with my own two hands, my own two hands, with my own two hands. I can make peace on earth with my own two hands, and I can clean up the earth with my own two hands, and I can reach out to you with my own two hands, with my own two hands, with my own two hands. Gonna make it a brighter place with my own. Gonna make it a safer place with my own. I'm gonna help the human race with my own two hands. I can hold on to you with my own two hands, and I can comfort you with my own two hands. But you've got to use your own two hands, use your own two hands, use your own two hands, with our own two hands, with my own two hands. I'm gonna make it a brighter place with my own. Gonna make it a safer place with my own. I'm gonna help the human race with my own. Oh, make it a brighter place with my own. I can hold you with my own. I can comfort you with my own. But you've got to use your own two hands. Use your own two hands. Use your own two hands.